Oil supply on high performance Kawasaki 900s has always been a problem. This particular bike, we have a factory deep sump kit and a pickup which goes down into the bottom as well, and this sump also has a hinged one-way gate welded into the bottom of it. Basically it's just an aluminium hinge which flaps back and forth depending on which way the oil's going, and it basically traps oil at the front where the pickup is. The other problem is that the motors leak basically in this area and up here where the block meets, where the head's bolted onto the block. There's an oil gallery goes up here, which is fed from this oil gallery across the back of the crankcases. It's also a supply on the other side as well. So what we did was machine the block and put plugs into it to block off the oil feed on each side. And then this oil gallery has a cap on the end here, stock standard. So we took that cap out, drilled and tapped it to take this banjo bolt, and machined up this aluminium fitting which supplied these two oil lines. Now the oil lines go up to the oil gallery across the back here, which feeds the inlet cam, and there's another hose goes across to an oil gallery that feeds the exhaust cam. Now to stop the oil going from here back down and leaking out, we had to block where the oil feeds down into the gallery. Otherwise oil will be getting into this gallery, but just from the other end. Now the more modern way of doing it is to replace this flexible hose with a CNC aluminium fitting, but this was done a long time before it became trendy. We've got ATP head studs in this, which are all torqued down to, I think, a little bit more than what they actually recommend. We're using copper head gaskets. There was no way of using standard ones, and the block is O-ringed, so the O-rings press into the gasket. They form a good gas tight seal, but it had a problem with oil tightness around these areas here. It didn't matter what we did, it leaked. So we just removed the oil from that area and just fed it remotely. This hose goes to the other side where there's exactly the same setup as this. So this hose here goes to the other side. Yeah, and that's basically all we did. There's the usual in here. There's the usual fittings to tap off and go to an oil cooler, which is at the front here. And then, as per usual turbo Kawasaki's, there's an oil feed here, comes off and goes to the turbocharger. Now, these engines have notoriously low oil pressure, having roller cranks, feeding the gearbox and all of that. So there is a restrictor in here, which it's in one of these fittings. There's a restrictor which reduces oil feed to the engine, and therefore makes it go to the turbo. So I think it only ends up being about 5 psi, which despite what people think is actually perfectly adequate, certainly for the older style Ray J turbos, which the Z1R TCs came with. So this is one of those turbos. It's been some modifications done to it, some small improvements, AR ratios of the housings, things like that. But this worked out real good. So I can't remember if we've got a 6mm restrictor or a 7. Yeah, one or the other. One of them, I think the 6mm was actually a little bit small and did starve the engine a little bit. But despite that, we never ever had a problem with cam bearings. These cam bearings are just fine. And this sort of low pressure requirement is backed up on my other bike, my little 125 twin, where I run a IHI turbo on that, you know, smaller, more modern one, not much more modern, a little bit more modern. We've got a 1mm restrictor in the oil feed, so the actual pressure at the turbocharger is probably not all that much, given the free flowing nature of turbocharger bearings and the 1mm restrictor. Anyway, that's all.